Namaste, everyone. My name is Sindhu Banerjee. I am an alumnus of Johns Hopkins University and of the Johns Hopkins chapter of Hindu Students Council, and it's my absolute pleasure to be introducing you to a very special guest tonight. Tonight we have Vijay Ramasamy. Vijay just recently won a Rhodes Scholarship as a graduate student of the University of Johns Hopkins. A quick introduction on Vijay. He is a public health studies major who graduated from Hopkins University in 2018 and led the team drafting state of the Kansas COVID-19 reopening plan and has been named a Rhodes Scholar, one of the top awards available to American college students. Ramasamy from Overland Park, Kansas, is one of 32 students to win a Rhodes Scholarship this year. The scholarships all provide expenses for 2 or 3 years of study at the University of Oxford in England. At Oxford, he intends to pursue a Master's of Science degree in Comparative Social Policy and a Master of Public Policy degree, hoping to improve his understanding of a global public health in order to make government services work better. So, as you can see, that Vijay is working on extremely pertinent issues, and we're extremely lucky to have him tonight. With that, I'll hand it over to JHU co-president Vani to take us forward through this Q&A session.
So thank you again, Vijay, for doing this with us. So to start off, we just wanted to ask how you and your family have been doing during quarantine.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I mean, it's wonderful to be here with JHU co-presidents and alumni of Hindu Students Council. It was such an important part of my college experience. So it's a joy to be here. It's been good. I think as good as can be. I'm really lucky that I get to be about 40 minutes from my parents, and both of my brothers were actually with us during a majority of the last couple of months. And so I got to be with my little nieces who are 1 and 4. And so that's always a joy. I got my nails painted. I got to listen to and watch every children's TV show on the planet. So it's been wonderful. It's been nice to be with them. I think it can definitely be tough. I think a little bit isolating. I think everybody's feeling that, but very grateful for sort of the wonderful privileges of being with family and to also go into work every day and work with some incredible people in what is an unprecedented time.
Yeah, that's really wholesome to hear. I think pretty much all of us have been looking at the pros and cons of quarantine, and more family time is definitely one of the blessings that we've had. So Vijay, we kind of wanted to get like a couple insights into what your life was like when you were attending Hopkins as an undergrad. So we were wondering, what is one of your favorite things about Hopkins and campus life, and what is one of your least favorite things about campus life?
Oh, you're gonna get me in trouble. But I think the first one's easy. I think there's a couple of things that I really enjoyed and look back on fondly. One of them is definitely HSC. I started as a freshman. And it was really a way to build community with people that sort of were thinking about the same questions about religion and spirituality that I was. And I was able to find some incredible mentors that were students. And one of them that some of you might remember, his name is Vijays. He's a medical student now at Johns Hopkins, but he was sort of my inspiration in Hindu Students Council. He used to do these Sunday fun facts where he would take different spiritual holidays, or he would take different spiritual concepts and really explain them in a very sort of intimate and relatable way. And it was incredible that somebody that was only a couple of years older than me was sort of speaking as if they had 50, 60 years of experience. And I had the wonderful pleasure of being his roommate after I graduated. And I think it even more cemented how incredible he was. And he was also such a beautiful singer. And I'm sure that you all still do bhajans now, but a treat for me every Sunday was listening to him sing. So I don't know if he's listening, but shout out to him. I think other than that, it's just I think there was an incredible opportunity to interact with great people when I was an RA. I think that my RA sort of changed the course of my college experience. I was dealing with a lot of issues with mental health, and it wasn't until my RA sort of sat me down and talked to me about those and talked to me about ways to get help that I think really changed the course of my experience in school. And to be a part of that and to be an RA and worked with some incredible people that I learned so much from was great. And I think that it was just a good community to be a part of. I still talk to so many friends from college, and I think it was a community of like-minded people that wanted to do something important and wanted to do something valuable in the world. And that is such an inspiring and energetic thing. Things I didn't like. Ooh, well, how can I don't know. I'm trying to think of the most politician answer I can get. Maybe that I didn't get to spend enough time there. No, I think that the things that I think could have been better, and this is just for me, is I think that, and it changed quite a bit as I kind of progressed in college, but I think that the one thing that could have helped me when I was a freshman was maybe a little bit more of an open and transparent environment about how it was okay to fail, and it was okay to try new things, and it was okay to not have a 5-year plan. I think that telling yourself that it's okay, and I got maybe a 35 on my first chemistry exam, and I think I got like a 45 on my first physics exam. And I think I remember myself thinking, everyone else is doing so well. Like, how am I supposed to sort of survive here and continue my education? And I think that it got so much better when I went on, where people were more open about their struggles, but more open about their mental health. And so it was much more of a learning, more collaborative community. And I think as much as we can start to be open about it's okay to take a gap year, it's okay to not have everything figured out immediately, I think that'll help a lot of people.
That's amazing, especially what you said at the end, like for the next generation to hear. We have quite a few high school students listening into the live stream, very young college students as well. And for them to hear that one of the United States Rhodes scholars like felt this way, that that they might have not done well on an exam or two, like during their early college experience.
Oh, it wasn't just an exam.
That's definitely reassuring. So thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah, so expanding more on your Hopkins experience, what do you feel were some of your most like impactful experiences there?
Sure. I had a lot, and I think a lot of them had to do with work that I was fortunate enough to be able to do in the city of Baltimore. I think one of the things that I would change, actually, going back to the last question, is I think that there's this sense to kind of demarcate the Hopkins community versus the Baltimore community. And I think as much as we can think about ourselves and everything as one sort of city, and that everybody, just like you would go back home to your hometown and be a part of that neighborhood and be a productive citizen and community member, we have to think about the city the same way. Hopkins is not different from the city. It uses the city's resources. It benefits from the city. And we, not just because we are students or because we believe that it's important, but because we are good community members, we have an obligation to view ourselves as people who are residents of the city. And so the city's issues and the things that we collectively have to work on together, it's our obligation to work on those. And I think what we can do, and what every Hopkins student should do, is view themselves as a resident of the city and a community member, just like you view yourself as a neighborhood person. And so the things that I got to do that I really loved were ways that I got to work at nonprofits through the Community Impact Internship Program, worked at a place called Charm City Care Connection, which connected folks with insurance and other sorts of tools like food stamps or helping people with bills, just sort of the mechanics and day-to-day of our healthcare industry, and help folks navigate. That was an incredibly important experience working in McElderry Park, which is such a wonderful community. I think the other things that I love to do, I mean, I was a high school debater. And so working with Baltimore Urban Debate League, coaching or volunteering, just sort of handing out pizza at tournaments or judging or those sorts of things, I think was an incredible experience for me to see young kids engage in an activity that I loved so much. I think the other thing that I did that was after college that was sort of tied to Hopkins a little bit was after I graduated a year early to do the Baltimore Core program, where I got to work in the city health department. And I think that was probably the most formative experience that I had in Baltimore. I worked with some incredible public servants that day in and day out were working really hard to make sure that we were making measurable impact on a lot of the health inequities that existed in the city. But it was also an incredible way to get to know Baltimore and get to know the community and get to know all of the amazing work that's happening in different pockets of the city, the ways that different community leaders, different community organizations are working every single day to make their communities better. I think it was very important. It was also a great example and an important and striking example of the historical inequities that existed in our city. The health department is funded 80% by grants and only 20% by the city. And so I know many of you have applied to grants maybe for your student group or anything like that. They end and you have to apply to them every year. And so it's hard to do long-term sustainable work if 80% of your department is funded by grants. And so it's just one example of how Baltimore deserves better. It deserves the resources it needs, and it deserves resources to sort of repair the historical discrimination, systemic racism that has impacted the city for so long, with redlining, with disinvestment, those sorts of things. And so it was sort of a clarion call of what we need to do as public servants and how we need to strengthen public services, but also a really incredible and inspiring experience to be a part of a city that I love so much and I want to come back to.
That's excellent. May I ask what type of debate you did in high school?
I did policy debate. The best type of debate.
I was in Lincoln Douglas in public forum.
Oh, yeah. No, I did public forum for a little bit too. I did extemp. I didn't get to do Lincoln Douglas, but for any policy debaters out there, that's my.
And I can also kind of see how like that has kind of helped guide you as well and impacted you. I had a follow-up question regarding what you just said. How, like tangibly, how can Hopkins students really get involved more in their communities and like, break out of that so-called bubble? And not just Hopkins students, like students in any city where there's a disconnect, for example, like Philadelphia, New Haven, Chicago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the first thing is what we talked about earlier, which is a mindset shift. I think there should be no thing as a Hopkins bubble. The university is in the city, it is of the city. And so we are all residents of the city. And so as much as we can, being good stewards of the places that we eat, the places that we shop, and making sure that we're just shopping at local businesses, that we are going and visiting different neighborhoods in the city, and we are being good community members. And it's also a question of find the different organizations that are already doing incredible work in the city and figure out what skills that you provide that can be a part of their larger mission. There's already work going on in the city. There's a really good quote, I forgot who it's from, that said that every solution that you can think of to an issue in Baltimore, it's already happening or it's happened before. And you need to, I guess we can find where that work is happening and figure out how can I best use my skills or develop the skills that are needed to help that organization's mission. And it doesn't have to be through Hopkins. It doesn't have to be through a student group. You can connect with people across the city and different organizations and sort of find the things that you love and give back just as you would in your own community, whether that be staying engaged with city politics. And so what's going on at the mayor's office, what's going on in city council, what's going on with your health department, for example, being engaged about what bills are coming up and how maybe you can provide testimony or at least just be engaged and be a good citizen. I don't know, a lot of folks may not be voters in the city and that may not be accessible for everybody, but that's also another thing that you can think about. The other thing I think is just viewing the city differently and viewing yourself as a resident of the city will just change the way that you interact. And I think that as much as you can do to be engaged, to pick up trash just as you would in your own hometown, to shop at local businesses, all of those sorts of things will just change the way that you interact and really change that concept. And there should never be a Hopkins bubble because it's of the city and for the city. And so find the things that you love and do the same things that you would do. Mentor students, work, volunteer, whatever you can to use your skills for the public good.
Got it. Changing gears just a little bit. We wanted to ask you, what role has faith played in your career? And secondarily, what role has faith played in your personal growth? Sure.
I think that as many, I think children of immigrants or immigrants, I'm an immigrant myself. I think I tend to have a complicated relationship with Hinduism. I think growing up, it's sort of morphed and evolved the way that I sort of interact with my spirituality. And that's as I think about how it can answer the big questions in life, things like why do bad things happen to good people, or how does this square with something that I've seen in the world, or how does this spiritual practice play out in my day-to-day life? Those are sorts of big questions that we, as especially folks that grew up here, interact with quite a bit. and going beyond sort of I know when I was younger, I didn't want to go to the temple. I wanted to go sit home and play on whatever Game Boy or whatever I had. And it took a long time to sort of develop where my niche was or where I fit in the larger sort of religion and through spirituality. And that's an ongoing journey, and one that I think we all have to go on ourselves, and we can really benefit from strong mentors and people that can take sort of maybe abstract concepts and apply them to daily life, and how we can find serenity, how we can find perspective using religion with all of the different things that we have to deal with as people and the things that the world has to deal with. A couple of things that I'm thinking about that I've really sort of centered in my life or found as sort of an anchor point to religion. And one of them was really from Vijays, who I mentioned earlier, which is this idea of what is my spiritual path. And for me, I think it's this idea of karma yoga, or sort of doing selfless deeds for the purpose of doing them and doing my duty. I think in my job, especially in public service, doing your duty and doing the right thing is a strong conviction that really sort of propels me every single day. Is when nobody's watching, when the circumstances are tough, how can you continually find the perspective to do the right thing and do your duty over and over and over again? And I think that religion has been a really important part of that, and really strengthening that conviction. The second part of karma yoga, I think for me that was really important, was the idea of not focusing on the outcome, but focusing on the process. So for example, I think after that first 32 or whatever I got on my chemistry exam, I was devastated, right? Because I was like, I'm not going to be able to achieve my goals. I can't even cut it on the first chemistry exam, which is intro chemistry. And I think that listening to Vijays, I think on Sundays, and also just thinking more about religion and those sorts of things, he really stressed the idea of it's about learning, it's about the process, and tying yourself to the end goal is not productive. Because if you enjoy the things that you're doing, enjoy the process, the every single day of learning, about the opportunities to be able to learn, the wonders of being able to learn, and you feel like you did your best, and you can answer the two questions of, did I do my best and did I learn something? And if the answer to those two questions is yes, it doesn't matter what grade you got. Because one, I will bet you that if you are focusing on the process, you'll end up better outcome anyway. But two, it's because we've been given incredible opportunities in this life to study at Hopkins, or to pursue and have the privilege of choice to be able to say, hey, I want to be a doctor, I want to do this, or I want to do this. And it's our obligation to focus on the learning, because that's what's going to benefit you when you end up in your career, right? And so I think that doing my duty and focusing on the process and not the outcome, and making sure I'm doing it for the right reasons, I think has been what I've taken out of religion.
That's amazing. And I think what you said, tying yourself to the end goal is not productive, is very, very wise. And I think a lot of students can take that away from this conversation for sure.
So what did you feel like your favorite memory was as president of JHU HSC?
I mentioned a couple. I think Vignesh singing was one of the biggest ones. I know that all of you on this call, and probably anybody who's been at HSC, will remember that Diwali was probably the most exhausting night of your life, but also sort of one of the most fun. I remember my like muscles aching after lugging all of the different equipment back into the basement of the HSC, but also feeling an incredible sense of pride about that event, and being able to bring in folks that from across the Hopkins community and also the Baltimore community to be able to kind of enjoy, learn more about our religion, our culture, and just be able to, I think the most fun for me is doing the prep beforehand. It can be like, I still remember one of the older people in HSC teaching me how to do knots so I could tie the lights on top of the rec center pole. And I did Boy Scouts for 7 years and I could never figure out how to do a knot. And he taught me how to do it in like 30 seconds. I immediately forgot, obviously. I couldn't do it for you today. But it was like a nice sort of moment of being with other people and putting on this big thing that we really thought was, I don't know, it was a really wonderful experience to see all those people dressed up and coming in and enjoying and having a good time and feeling like all of that work was worth it. So that would be my number one experience.
Yeah, the volley prep is definitely a rite of passage.
Yeah.
But so moving on to the main part of this talk, which is, could you tell us about your journey to becoming a Rhodes Scholar? So
I don't know if there is one journey. I think that I never expected to apply to the scholarship. It was kind of happened by happenstance. And I think that I was actually applying to a bunch of different scholarships as a way to get myself to apply to grad school. I thought I'm going to procrastinate everything in my life. And so unless I have somebody telling me you have to submit this essay by this week and a draft by this week, you're never going to do it. And so I am eternally grateful to the folks at the Fellowships Office at Hopkins for the incredible privilege of being able to work with them and sort of giving somebody who, like me, who cannot find a single ounce of regimen in their life, a sense of structure and over the course of the summer. I think that for other folks that are thinking about applying, apply. I almost didn't apply to this scholarship because I talked myself out of it a couple of times. I thought, I don't have the grades for this. Like, I don't have this for this. Like, I can't do this or I can't do that, or this doesn't make sense for me. And I think that having somebody force me to do it was the only reason I did it. And I think I'm very grateful for it because it demystified the whole process. If you are thinking about doing something like this, whatever it be, it doesn't have to be this scholarship, it can be anything. Don't be the one to count yourself out. You deserve it. You owe it to yourself to just try. And the one thing that I'll say is, I have any advice, and I don't have much, is that you should continue to do the things that give you purpose and energy, regardless of what you feel like you should be doing. The question of should is a really dangerous one, right? I think that a lot of us, and I won't speak for everybody, have a privilege of choice. We get to choose sort of the things that we want to do. And many people around the world, and even folks in the city of Baltimore and in Hopkins, don't have that same choice. And so if you have that privilege, it is up to you to find the things that you are passionate about, that give you energy every single day, and be the best at it and continue to do it regardless of what anything else was. I came into Hopkins thinking that I was going to go into medicine. I think like many students that come into Hopkins. And it was an emotional roller coaster to be able to come to terms with not only my family, but more importantly, myself, which wasn't for me. And I was struggling, I wasn't doing well, and it just wasn't for me. And to be able to let go of that and to really double down on, I want to go into public service. This is what gives me energy. It what gets me to kind of wake up every day and be excited about work and be excited about the future. And really focus on that was a long journey, but one that I'm so grateful for, and grateful for the people that helped me along that. Because the only reason that I am even able to be in this position of going there is because I did public service and I stuck to those convictions and I continue to do it. And that's what I love. And I want to continue to do that for the rest of my life. And so that sort of following your passions and figuring out what gives you a spark and doubling down on those and kind of not listening to anything else, and being the best at it and figuring out how you can use that to serve your community and serve the world, I think is the most important piece of the puzzle when applying to things like this or just moving forward in life.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. Thank you so much for sharing. And I guess just to know a little bit more about I know you shared a lot about your passions and what you did after undergrad, but you had mentioned before that you had taken a gap year, or could you talk a little bit more about that process and then coming back after that?
Yeah, it's funny because I think me taking a gap year was just me avoiding applying to medical school initially, and then now my gap year has become I'm never going to medical school. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I took the MCAT. I didn't take the MCAT, but I signed up for it 3 times, and I quit 3 times. So I think how much money is that? It's like $900 that I think I lost over signing up for the MCAT. I also signed up for the GRE a couple of times and didn't do that. And so I've racked up quite a bill for both of those organizations. I think that me taking a gap year initially was me being like, yeah, I'll apply to medical school at some point. I just need to work for a year and then I'll be fine. And I think that it was really me, if I think about it, it was my gut telling me that this is not what you want to do. Just double down on the things that give you energy and give you life. And I think I always knew it was public service because from the first sort of class I took at Hopkins with Dr. Peter Bielenson, who used to be the health commissioner in Baltimore, I could never find another job or another vocation or anything else where you could get up every single day and your only goal was to, how do I kind of tackle big problems and make people's lives better? That is the entirety of what we think about in public service. And so I couldn't find any other thing that gave me as much energy as the idea of spending every single day talking about issues of childcare, health inequities, systemic racism, all of these different things, and figuring out how can we use government, which has historically furthered a lot of things like systemic racism, which has historically been a negative actor for so many people, and use it as an agent for change. And I think the government and public services are one of the greatest sort of institutions that we have, and various potential that we have to make big measurable impacts on the problems that we face. And so I think I took a gap year as a way to avoid sort of the inevitability of not doing what I think my family may have wanted me to do, although they're very supportive, or I didn't want to do. And I ended up being a very good decision where I sort of was able to realize the things that I loved and just it never looked back since.
Vijay, kind of digging deeper into that first experience you had in college, at what stage of the implementation of like these policies were you involved in?
So I'll talk a little bit about Baltimore. I think when I was at the city health department, it was a lot of sort of implementing grants. And so the federal government would have sort of initiatives or ways that they wanted to reform our healthcare system. And a lot of the way that they do that is that they issue grants to local states, to local cities to kind of pilot these different reforms and see how they would work. So for example, when I was in Baltimore, what we were focusing on, and I know many public health students will recognize this, is we were trying to think about if you look at things like Medicaid or Medicare, so public insurance systems, what if you started paying for not just when I break my hand or whatever, but you start paying for the social determinants of health? So what if an insurance company started paying for food or started paying for housing? Would that actually lead to decreased healthcare costs in the long term? And the thesis behind that is that a lot of your health is not really determined by what happens in your doctor's office. A lot of your health is things that we sometimes take for granted in our lives, which is a hot meal every single day, a place to rest your head at night, access to communities where you aren't dealing with the issues of environmental racism and pollution, and not dealing with issues of trauma or things like lead poisoning, which many kids in Baltimore had to deal with, especially in the 90s, but also, I mean, even today. I think that's the thesis behind this idea that the federal government was trying to implement, where they were saying, we'll pay for case navigators, we'll start to pay for and connect people to community resources and see if that actually decreased healthcare costs in the long term. And so my job was to work with other folks in our health department to try to implement that grant and see if it actually create health savings and insurance savings in the long term. And so my specific project was to create a website that helped people find different resources, whether they be substance use resources, whether they be food resources, what have you in the community. So you can immediately connect folks to those and then see, does that make a measurable impact on health? And I think that was a very formative experience because it kind of it's very ground level, and that's what I really love doing. Now I'm kind of higher up in that kind of sort of chain, right? Like we're not implementing grants right now. We're thinking about how to budget different state initiatives. We're thinking about how to create grants ourselves, or we're thinking about how to sort of set long-term policy or long-term goals that then other actors help, or we're trying to shape legislation. And so it's two different sides of the policy process that I think it's been a wonderful benefit to learn from. And I think if I was to choose, I'd probably go back to the sort of nitty-gritty of working with communities and working on implementation, but who knows? Where the future will hold, but it's been an incredibly wonderful experience.
Yeah, I can tell it's that nitty grittiness that really excites you, especially at the beginning of one's career. And so you mentioned the future, and we were also just wondering, like, what are your next steps as a Rhodes Scholar?
Sure. So we'll see how my applications turn out. So I applied to a couple of different programs, and so we'll see how that turns out. But I think I'll start hopefully in September. We'll do 2 years. One in either, first year will either be South Asian Studies, Economic History, or Social Policy. I haven't decided which one yet. And the second year will be Public Policy. And after that, I'll be back in public service. And so whether that be, I would love to come back and work in Kansas. I love the state. I love the people. And there's an incredible amount of work to do. And there's incredible people already doing that work, and it would be an honor to continue that. Otherwise, I would want to work at a city health department or what have you. But I think for me, what I want to do after this scholarship is not necessarily tied to a certain job, but it's sort of tied to a certain ideal. And that ideal is sort of preaching the gospel of government and preaching the gospel of public services and the importance of having a strong public foundation. One of the things I think I've been thinking about quite a bit, especially during this pandemic, is this idea of sort of TM Sandlin's, what do we owe each other? And I think that we can think a lot about and learn a lot about from the idea of what do we owe each other? What do we owe our communities? What do we owe the world? What do we owe ourselves? And I think that government and strong public services, whether they be good schools, good roads, access to things like broadband, righting the racial injustices of our past, those are things that we owe each other. We owe each other strong communities where everybody has access to the same sorts of privileges that I've had access to in my life. And I think that we owe each other the ability to listen and the ability to work together on things, and the ability to really understand the injustices that have happened, but also how can we move and fix them forward. And so as I think about what I want to do, I want to think about the fact that strong public services, strong, well-funded public services are a huge part of what we owe each other. And so everybody should have access to those basic things that benefit all of us. Government is not just for one group of people, or public services are not just for one group of people or one issue or what have you. It is for everybody. It is the foundation from which we build strong communities. And so underfunding those public services, attacking those public services is not beneficial for anybody. It may lead to some small gains for one group of people to defund public services or to attack public services, but in the end, having good schools, having access to good opportunities, and righting the racial injustices of our past, I think, can benefit all of us. And so I will continue over the next however long to kind of preach the gospel of government, ensure that public systems across the United States have the resources that they need to solve these big problems that we see.
Yeah, I think that's tremendously important, especially for some individuals and communities, reinstilling that faith that might have been lost for whatever reason that might be.
So you already touched on this a little earlier, but do you have any more advice for undergraduates at Hopkins or at other colleges?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, I don't have a lot of advice, but I'll say a couple of things I think have been important to me. I think the one thing that I kind of mentioned earlier is college is hard, and so and growing up is hard, and so many things about our future, especially at this time when we're at sort of inflection points of when we're going into college or leaving college, it can be really difficult, and it's okay, and it's okay to get help. And I think that one of the things that's good about sort of our generation is that we're talking a lot more about mental health. And we're talking a lot more about getting help, but I think it can still be hard. Although like I can ostensibly have a public health degree where I understand that getting access to mental health care is important and taking my medication is important, I still don't do it all the time. I still don't do it most of the time. And it's this idea that I think that we can all sort of benefit from, whereas the idea of it is okay to get help, and getting help is hard. Even folks that do have the privilege of having insurance, it's still really hard to find care. And so leaning on other people, leaning on the resources of your university, whether it be free care at your university or case managers or what have you, your doctor, your friends, in times of need or in times where you don't feel like you have sort of a grasp where things are tough, it's okay to get help. And I think that that's one of the most important things that you can kind of think about and internalize, because there's a lot of shoulds in life. There's a lot of people telling you should do this, you should do that. Who cares if you don't work right after college? Who cares if you don't go to medical school right after college? Who cares if you did poorly in one class or did poorly in another class or whatever? Like, it doesn't matter. As long as you're doing the things that you love and you're doing the things that you care about, that's all that matters. And that you are doing something that you feel like gives you energy in life, that's all that matters. And so take it from me, who barely made the GPA cutoff for this scholarship. Don't know how many poor grades I can tell you about, and how many times I was like, yeah, no, even if I get into medical school, I would not want me to be your doctor. And so take it from me that it's okay, take your time, lean on other people, be a support for other people. I think the other thing is, whatever you do, serve your community. That doesn't mean you have to go into government or run for public office. That doesn't even mean that you have to sort of do something that's very public like that. It means being a good member of your community, back to the idea of what we owe each other. It means helping your neighbor. It means being civically engaged in what's happening at your local school board or your local city council or your local town government. It means advocating for issues that you see. It means thinking about the people that are falling through the cracks in our government system and our public services. It means being nuanced and understanding where our institutions are going to fail people and have failed people in the past and how we need to right those wrongs. It means thinking critically about who's being left behind or who's not at the table because of systemic racism or because of other issues, and being and putting yourself in a place where you're not speaking for other people, but you are empowering other people and using your sorts of privileges to be a good steward of your community. And I think that as much as we can think about ourselves and wherever we are as community members and think about what we owe each other, the listening, the love, the kindness, what have you, I think that our entire world will be better off to it. It doesn't matter what career you choose. You can be working in banking or public service or be a doctor or whatever. You can still everybody can do the things that are necessary to build strong communities and stay engaged.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's something we all need to hear, no matter what like stage of life we're all at. Priya, are there any questions in the chat that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on this, but are there any other tips you have? Because someone's asking, as an incoming freshman, do you have any tips to keep yourself motivated and keep going when things get rough?
It's a really good question. I think something that I'm sort of thinking about all the time, even today, as I'm working and things like that. I think the most important thing is to take time for yourself and sort of sit in your emotions for a little bit. Again, back to the idea of should, I think that there's sometimes this idea of like, even if you're feeling bad one day or you're feeling rough, and I think everybody has those days to be like, no, you need to power through it. And like, that doesn't matter. Like you need to get this, and this, like I need to focus on what I need to do to study, whatever. And I think that the core of that is neglecting your emotions. And I think the most important thing is to embrace your emotions. If you're sad, feel sad, sit and cry, eat ice cream, do whatever you need to do. Feel sad. If you're angry, feel angry. Think about why you're feeling angry. And one of the things that Vigneshwar used to talk a lot about is being observant about your emotions and being able to master them. And a lot of the big thing about being observant about your emotions and things that you're feeling is to be reflective. And so the best thing that you can do is sit in your feelings and think about, why do I feel this way? That it's okay to feel this way. That it's okay that I'm feeling sad. It's okay that I'm feeling angry. And whatever outlet you have, some people it's writing about those things, some people it's watching TV, some people it's just sitting or talking to friends or doing whatever. But kind of divorcing yourself from all the things that you might have to do on your to-do list and just sitting in it for a while, I think will be really helpful, because I think a lot of the thing that really leads to stress long-term is if we kind of ignore our emotions, if we suppress them and say, no, it's fine. You got to take care of your body, you got to take care of your brain. And so as much as you can sit in those emotions and really think about things and tell yourself that it's okay, I think that's the most beneficial thing that I've seen. And sometimes you need to watch Netflix, eat some ice cream, or do whatever. And finding those things for yourself is also important.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's good advice for anyone, not just freshmen. Also, a question from a little while ago. How did you stay disciplined during your gap year, like eventually?
Oh, I don't think I was very disciplined. I think that I told you I signed up for the MCAT a couple of times and then didn't take it. I think that if you're going to take a gap year, and whether maybe you go on to medical school or what have you, I think the important thing is to just really live in the moment and focus on sort of the reasons why you did it and what you want to sort of gain out of the experience. There's lots of reasons to do those things. Maybe it's like I had a really tough time in school, and so all I wanted to do was get out of school. And I was like, if all I have to do is get out of school, then I'll be like, okay, it's fine. I'll go to medical school, like have a break, whatever. And I think that whatever the reason is that you feel like you need to take a gap year, it's to really live in the moment and really focus on those experiences, because whoever you're working for, they deserve your full sort of attention and engagement and energy, and being very sort of present in those moments and really absorbing everything that you can absorb and giving back as much as you can give back, I think is important. But I think it's not just during your gap year, but throughout your college experience, be reflective. Be reflective about, what do I really sort of find energy in? What do I really care about? And sometimes those lead to scary questions, like it did for me, of like, do I really want to go to medical school? I've taken all these pre-med classes. I've suffered through biochemistry. Do I really want to abandon this now? And that's okay to mull those questions over. And that doesn't mean doesn't mean that you're immediately going to abandon your entire thing or whatever. It just means that you're being reflective and thinking about really what you want. And maybe that'll lead to an insight that you didn't have before. So like, I still want to be a doctor, but I want to be a doctor who does this. Or I want to be a doctor, but I also want to do this. And I think that those sorts of things are really important, because none of this is linear. It's not this to this to this to this to this. People, any number of things can happen, right? Like people can go into medical school, drop out, come back. That's okay too. You can take 5 years and then go to medical school. I know somebody that's 35 and in medical school right now. There's nothing that's linear. And so taking a gap year, there should be no pressure about it. If you want to take 10 gap years, you can do that. But you should just think of those things as, what am I doing this experience for? Live in the moment. And how can I continue to be reflective about what this teaches me about myself and things that I enjoy?
Vijay, there's another, I think, really important comment / question that we got. And it's asking, is there more work to be done in making Hindu students more proud in embracing their Hindu values and identity? And secondarily to that, do you think Hindus sometimes hide their identity / saliency?
Yeah, I think that that's true for a lot of communities here in the United States, right? And it doesn't have to be a specific religious community. I think that it's tough, especially as for a lot of us are children of immigrants, or maybe young immigrants, or folks that came here when we were very young ourselves. And I think a lot of us think about sort of the duality of growing up here and the differences in not only religion, but in culture versus how our parents grew up or how we feel at home. And we sometimes think we're living two different lives, right? One outside of the home and one inside of the home. And that can be tough. And that can lead to feeling like you have to sort of suppress or get away from the parts of you at home, because you want to fit in. Everybody wants to fit in. Everybody wants to be a part of the community. And I grew up in a predominantly white community in Kansas that didn't have a lot of people that were either of color or specifically were South Asian, or even were specifically Hindu. And my parents knew a lot of people that I think I really connected with, and younger people that I really connected with. But that, I don't know how it was for you, but we kind of compartmentalized those things, right? We had an Indian friend group, and then we had our school friend group. We went to temple, but then we went to school and didn't really talk about those things because we wanted to fit in and all of those things. And college is one of those times where I think it's really beautiful that you can come together with people in things like Hindu Student Council and really embrace and really understand, where do you fit in the larger religion. And I think that one of the really important parts of being proud of it is being nuanced about it and really sort of figuring out what it means for you. There's no one prescribed way to engage with Hinduism. The beauty of the religion is that you find your own path. There's multiple paths to go down. And so if that means that you don't like going to the specific temple, but you like sort of reflecting on specific cultural practices and things like that, that's perfectly fine too. If it's more about, for you, karma and all of those things and sort of doing your duty and all of those things, that's okay too. The important thing is, just like everybody else in the country is sort of proud of their culture and proud of their religion and proud of the things that they do and the places that they come from, you deserve to have that too. And obviously not to a detrimental degree. And I think there's a lot of issues around the world of when in any religion, when sort of there can be tied to things like nationalism and things like that, which can be detrimental. But thinking about on a micro scale, I think the important thing is, just like people in this country, whether they be Christians or anybody, is especially being like sort of minority in this country, seeing the racial majority, especially where I came from, they got to be sort of proud of the things that their culture and those sorts of things. And so you deserve that too. And so I think the important thing is to understand that there's no set way to do Hinduism. It's how you want to interact with it and how you want to find your niche and to find other people that sort of are thinking about these big questions in life, and that you deserve to be sort of proud of those things and proud of your culture, because it's a beautiful and wonderful culture, just like there are beautiful and wonderful cultures in Islam and beautiful, wonderful cultures in Christianity and all of these different things. And one of the things that Hopkins is really good at is thinking about that interfaith angle of what can we learn from other people and how can we find that we're more similar than we are different when we're thinking about religion? How can we kind of empower each other in our religious paths? And so thinking about how those things play out in our daily lives will automatically make you more proud of your religion, of your culture, and sort of thinking about yourself as somebody who has dual identities but deserves to be proud of all of those identities.
I see. And I guess the last question from the comments section is, how can Hindu Students Council at Hopkins and otherwise, how can we keep more alumni like you, like maybe involved in post? Because I remember when I was still a sophomore at Hopkins, like I think Diwali while you were president was one of the best Diwalis I've ever experienced. So I'm wondering, like, you put in your like 4 years at Johns Hopkins HSC, and then like, are there ways we can keep you involved even afterwards?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a really good question. I don't know if I have a really good answer for you.
And not you specifically, but just
No, it's a very important question, and I think it's one that I think a lot of communities across the country are dealing with. Is that especially immigrant communities are dealing with, is how do you sort of incorporate and sort of morph and really strengthen and continue these cultures, especially when there's so many pressures of being in the United States and not really having a kind of a touchstone to those, especially sort of where I grew up. I think the number one thing, and I think that Hindu Students Council does a really important part of this, is to be as inclusive as possible. And so no matter who you are, where you come from, how you view religion, how you interact with religion, that it is okay, and this is a big tent for a reason, and that there are different people that come to religion and come to spirituality at different points in their life, at different phases and things like that, for different reasons. And the important thing is to be inclusive of different identities, of different viewpoints. And I think that the more and more that we view religion as an inclusive community where you can find your path to answer some of life's big questions and find serenity in difficult points of life and find the thing that we're all looking for, which is community, I think that more and more people will be sort of engaged. From a pragmatic or practical perspective, I think it's you could probably clone Vignesh 15 times, and then you could probably have a million more people engaged. But I think the important thing is to have events with people like Vignesh there are people that aren't sort of as young as him, but maybe people that are a little bit older who really understand how to connect religious concepts to the daily life that we are all leading, and the sort of things that we talked about earlier, right? Being an Indian immigrant in the United States, being a child of immigrants in the United States, all the different pressures that we have and differences in culture that we have, tying religion and making it practical for every day. And there's a lot of really important religious speakers that have different viewpoints on those, and having a diverse perspective of those and having events with those, I think will help people stay continually engaged. One of the reasons why I stayed engaged, I think, with spirituality in general was because, one, I was Vignesh's roommate, but two, because I think I was able to sort of understand the value that it had in my life, and I wanted to communicate that value to other people that were younger than me and sort of give a different perspective of how it influenced my life. And having people that can come and do that in a much more intelligent way than I can, I think will help give people a place. And I think that's all that we want to do, is make sure that everybody feels like they have a home, and not only Hindu Students Council, but at the IFC, but also generally in our religious community, and that we are being tolerant, inclusive, and as open as possible.
Yeah, this Vignesh sounds like quite a character. Hopefully we can have an event with him as well. And
you should definitely invite him to something.
Yeah,
He's gonna be mad at me for but probably not.
Okay, hopefully not. So I guess the last question we wanted to ask to end it is where do you see yourself in 10 years? I know this might be a little bit difficult knowing that your pathway isn't exactly linear, but.
Yeah, no, and I think we've touched on it quite a bit. I don't know. I think that's the exciting thing, right? I think that I don't know where I'll be in 10 years, but I know the things that I want to continue to work on. And I think that for me, a lot of wise people have told me that it's important to sort of not tie yourself to a specific job or something like that. Although it's wonderful and important to have goals, it's to tie yourself to certain skills and values. And so what type of person do I want to be in 10 years? What sorts of skills do I want to grow in 10 years, both professionally and personally? I think for me is where I want to be in 10 years is be a stronger, more effective public servant. And that means learning different management skills, leadership skills, ways to talk about public service and talk about public policy and those sorts of issues in a more intelligent and compelling way, thinking more about and being more cognizant of and really sort of understanding sort of the history of government and how it has historically failed communities, but also how it can be an agent for change. Those are sorts of things that I want to learn. I think I want to be a better friend. I want to work on my mental health. I want to be more sort of a secure person. I want to sort of, I don't know. I think that I want to sort of uphold sort of the ideals that I'm trying to work on right now and be more effective at them. And so if I see myself in 10 years, I think the one constant will be that I will be in public service. I don't know what form that will take, but I want to sort of grow mental health wise and sort of who I am and how and sort of my convictions. And maybe that'll change. Maybe in 10 years, you won't see me in public service. You'll see me in something else. But I think that the important thing is those ideas of serving your community and really understanding what we owe to each other and what role I can play in solving and really working on the big problems of our time, I think is the major sort of project of my career is how can we use government as a vehicle to do those things. And so as long as I'm working on that and I feel like I'm a good person, I think that that's sort of all I want in the next 10 years.
That's amazing. And we can pretty much see like how these dharmic concepts of seva, of karma, of the idea of doing your duty without worrying too much about the outcome, how these are really intertwined with your passion for public health and public service. So that's like so fascinating to see. And yeah, Vijay, you're a person of tremendous diligence, intelligence, knowledge, and conviction. And just talking to you for even less than an hour has been so inspirational to me, and pretty much I can guarantee everybody watching this. So we just wanted to say, like, thank you so much for speaking to us, for taking time out of your night to drop so much wisdom on us. Like, I feel pretty overwhelmed at the moment, but just want to say thank you, and I'll pass it to Vani for some final remarks.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone who joined in and watched it. Gave all those questions, and of course to Vijay once again. And yeah, I guess even though we're all online, at least we were able to have this Zoom event with everyone here. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. I know this was such an important part of my college experience and continues to be an important part of my life. And so appreciate everything that you guys are doing. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your semester. And yeah, enjoy, have fun, go do something fun. Don't study, go do something fun.
All right. Thanks, Vijay. Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Goodbye.